And we'll start off our meeting tonight by asking for approval of our minutes for May 16th and 18th of 2023. And I'm going to call on our Vice Chairman, Commissioner Paul Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I reviewed the minutes of the 16th and 18th and found them in order and move for approval.
I have a motion and a second. Commissioner Serino, any questions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, then we'll go right back into it. We looked at the general purpose school fund for 2023-24 at our last meeting, and we did not come to a agreement on that one. So that's the first order of business for us tonight. I'll open the floor to anybody on the committee that has any questions or comments to that, or if not, we can call on our superintendent who happens to be here. Commissioner Irving.
Yes, I was going to see if we could suspend the rules and ask the director of schools to be available.
I don't think we have to suspend the rules to invite him up since this is a committee meeting. Dr. Sullivan, if you wouldn't mind joining us. I think they want to recap.
Ooh. I've heard this was going to be the good meeting to be a part of tonight.
Any questions, Commissioner?
Okay, I didn't know if there was going to be some other discussion. Okay. Okay, so this budget cycle, TISA basically came to the rescue, provided the $28 million, and provided the other funds basically that you needed to balance from the prior deficit and make up the increase the school board adopted for 23-24. Okay. So at this point, what I try to focus on, just from my perspective, is look 2 or 3 years down the road. And so the question is, do you expect to be able to balance your budget, that's 141, okay, using MOE and TISA funds without additional pennies from property taxes for the next 3 years or so?
For me to say for the next 3 years, I don't think I can make a judge on that. Am I concerned about us having a huge increase in expenditures for next year, for example? No, I'm not. There are a couple things that I think are contingent on that. One is what happens with our growth. That is a huge factor we have to consider. Second is what is going to be the operational costs of new buildings that we have that come online, when they come online, if they come online, all those different types of things. But again, we do have a very healthy fund balance right now that we could draw on if needed. The other part is this doesn't include all TISA revenue that we will be receiving. You mentioned the comment about TISA helping save that. We budgeted priorities based on knowing that TISA was going to be there. So if TISA hadn't been there, we wouldn't have budgeted some of our priorities. I know that probably doesn't answer your question directly, but as far as at some point, I do worry about 4 or 5 years from now, Rutherford County pays well over what the local match is required. I know that I've said in 5 years, Michael, is that when the TISA MOE local match is removed in 5 years? I think that's so far out, I don't think any of us can answer that question. What does that portion look like? But the county is so far above that, I don't anticipate that being a big issue.
That would not be relevant for this county. That was for counties who, under the new TISA formula, wouldn't. It was a hold harmless period. And so that's not relevant for us. We are so far above it. The school system would have to request MOE for probably longer than 5 years. I haven't ran the exact numbers. It would be well out there before we even got close to that local match because we are so far above it. And keep in mind, there are certain revenues that are automatically going to increase MOE every year anyways that are out of our control, that are set by state statute. And so just keep that in mind. But that was, the TISA law did not touch the maintenance of effort law. That's a different title and chapter. So I do feel that it would be 5 years plus before that even came close.
Just kind of, and Brian and I have not had this conversation yet. One thing we're able to do with maintenance of effort this year was strictly just ask for maintenance of effort, of course. If we start to see, especially as we look on bringing those high school additions and needing more staffing, instead of asking for maintenance of effort, possibly requesting the same pennies and just taking the growth of the penny would probably be my next request, instead of asking for additional new pennies to the property tax.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
That's basically where I was headed next.
Yeah.
Because, you know, the cost of staffing the 3 new high school additions, the new building on Church that's built into 23-24.
Yep.
Okay. What's the timeline for those going online or in use?
Yeah.
And what do you anticipate being the source of funding for
Great
those?
question. So our South Church Street property, I drove by it on the way over here, and it frustrates me because I want to be in it tomorrow, but we're nowhere near that. As we continue to look at that, I don't even believe January 1st is a realistic date as we continue to move forward. Our high schools will come online for the 25-26 school year. A new elementary school would come online the 25-26 school year as well. So we're 2 budget cycles away. That is where I can't confidently say that we would only ask for MOE for that 25-26 school year, because that is all 4 projects coming online at one time. But we do have a healthy fund balance to be able to use, and if we're still growing, we should increase revenue as well.
Thank you. Is Sonia around? I don't see Sonia. Okay, I'll pass on the question for now.
Any other comments from committee members? Recognize
Dr.
Chairman Harris.
Sullivan, I was looking over your budget, and it looks like you're wanting to add 133 positions, and without a school being built, is this 133 because of the 3 additions that we're building? Or can you explain to me
Yep.
why we need 133 more?
Be happy to. So just straight off the bat, 19 of those are putting a behavior interventionist in our elementary schools that have over 500 students. So I don't think it's any secret behavior is something that we're struggling with really nationwide with student behavior. And so we have alternative seats for students at the middle and high school level. We don't have them at the elementary level. So that is 19 of those positions. Do you have the entire list? Because went through every one of those, and looking at the rest of your general education positions, we truly look at how were the numbers that we grew in each grade band. And so for kindergarten through 5th grade, we are looking at that 1 to 20 or 1 to 25 grade. So we take the number of students that we grew and divide it by 20 or 25, depending on, to get those growth positions. 6 through 8 would be 1 to 25 to 30 if it's 7th and 8th grade, and then high school we use 1 to 22.7. So they're all in those general education type positions. Special education, we probably need closer to 20 or 30. We're only asking for 10 additional positions because we don't believe we'll fill them. And so those are 10 positions. ESL is included in that as well. Our 11 assistant principals, 8 of those are comprehensive high schools and additional assistant principals, so that when we open an annex, those are part of that. So we would have an additional one there. School counselors, adding 1 to all of our comprehensive high schools. Yeah. Adding those to each one of our comprehensive high schools: Blackman Middle, Roy Waldron, Rock Springs Elementary, Stewart's Creek Elementary. We had additional general education EAs. And so when you're looking at kind of all those positions, it truly goes down to us adding about 1,000 kids and where those kids came out to.
I know you had to have a teacher per special ed. Do we have, how many one-on-ones do we have?
That number's constantly changing because of the IEPs that are there. 300 and special education EAs, 361, does that sound right?
Today we calculated them for their bonus.
So 384. And those are not just one-on-ones, those would be serving either in your structure, it would include your one-on-ones.
Yeah, but one-on-ones, we have some of those.
We absolutely do, yes. And as students move in from other districts, we adopt their IEP for that time being, and that is a challenge that we have. But that is part of the reason you don't see additional SPED EAs. We're trying to, even though that's a need, we're trying to get a handle of that as well. And then being one thing I thought of, Commissioner Harris, that includes our 141 EAs. We are going to have a couple EAs, several dozen in 142, which is our federal, but you guys don't see that part. So I don't want to mislead you in saying we have 380 whatever, because we do have some in federal as well.
So how many counselors do we have per high school?
Each one will have 5 as of next year.
Is that adequate?
No, sir. It is
So
well
what's the number that we need to be at?
1 to 250 or 1 to 350. We sit somewhere between 1 to 450 and 1 and 550 with these
So an
additional positions.
4?
As
You
time
need a
goes.
total of 9 counselors per high school?
No, we would want to have somewhere between 6 and 8 for our large high schools. We looked at adding one, especially like Siegel necessarily doesn't meet that threshold yet, but we know with our rezoning plan, we want to go ahead and add that for this year as well.
Anybody else from the committee? They're gathering their thoughts. I want to ask again about something I brought up the other night. It's where we were using the shared revenue out of 141 toward some elementary projects that are not an elementary project. Can you explain to me why y'all wanted to use that shared money versus the money that's not? Because that's still, I mean, that's about $167,000 that's kind of sticking to me.
So I definitely understand that perspective. What we're looking at, as you guys are well aware, we have well over $200 million in deferred maintenance. Realizing that we are only asking for the same exact amount that we had last year, we are trying to take care of some of our projects ourselves instead of relying on 177 to cover all of the projects that we had. We, of course, could have included that as part of the projects. The other portion, and just, you guys know I'm transparent, part of the reason we looked at Laverne High School has had staffing openings all year. Part of our reason for not being so far in the deficit this year is because Laverne High School had openings. It made sense for us to be able to use some of the funding that was not going to Laverne High School to address Laverne High School.
Do you not have an elementary school on the horizon that money could be spent on?
Probably, I'm sure that we do.
I mean, I see that 167,000, whatever that figure was more money you could use on capital projects myself. That's still my feeling on it. And like I said, I hadn't grasped. I hear you say that you don't have enough money to address all your capital projects. Well, you're never going to have, because there'll always be something come up, and that's one reason that we swap them around. But I don't know. Like I said, I want to hold on to every penny that we can.
I will tell you, part of that as well was we realized that Laverne High School was going to be part of our next ask, and I was trying to lower some of that number. I mean, just fully transparent, I was trying to lower the number of our ask if we asked for an addition or renovation for that school.
Anybody else from the committee have a question? Chairman Phillips?
Thank you. Eagleville has been kind of a standalone school for a long, long time. Standalone is not the right word, okay? But that school has a tremendous amount of community pride. What are their plans for Eagleville? Will it grow? Will it grow from the number? Will it expand? Will it grow? Is there some type of a long-term view for Eagleville?
So with it being very much a community school, just like you mentioned, I would not be one to suggest that we remove the K-12 aspect, especially as we are looking at our schools and struggling to find land. I think we're going to eventually get back to where we're building smaller, more community-based schools in those areas where we took high schools away, just like Rockvale. The long-term plan was our zoning group actually brought up that Eagleville has room to add students at Eagleville. And so what our initial thoughts are is kind of looking at that zone for Eagleville, going out towards Rockvale and expanding it out further. We actually talked about this at our board meeting last Thursday, that in the past the argument has been you don't want to mess with Eagleville's zone because it changes their athletic classification. We're not in that ability with the size of our county to worry about athletic classification. And I hate that for athletics, but I'm not doing my job as a director of schools and looking out for our resources and taxpayer money if I'm not putting students into a school because I'm worried about athletic classification. So I fully expect that school to grow. Hope that answers your question.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure if we've left 141 or we've moved on, but I have kind of a transitional question anyway. Have we moved on to 177?
You can, if you've got a question, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. The governor, legislature gave us about $200 million, or has provided in legislation about $200 million for school safety to harden schools, among other things. Do you know how much of the 156 million that's the commission approved for Riverdale, Oakland, Smyrna is eligible to be recouped under that program? Numbers I've heard are maybe as high as 17 million, but I don't know.
We have not heard that officially. We're in the middle of a transition with our Commissioner of Education, so the information is slow at best in coming to the school systems. I don't anticipate having any real numbers till August. When I take that number that they were looking at and divide it out by the number of schools, I don't anticipate it being a huge addition for us safety-wise. Anything we can, we absolutely will. And I know one thing that we don't want to get into details around school safety, but I'm appreciative of the commission going ahead and approving our 3 additions because it would have been a higher cost. The governor now has signed anything that it goes into effect after July 1st for new school buildings, has to have that bulletproof resistant glass on any of the bottom floor. And so that would have had an extravagant cost, and we're looking at doing that anyways, but being able to have that mandated would have had an additional cost to those buildings.
Okay, so we'll know in August. And
That's my,
and shifting very slightly, the SROs, I know that's an operating side expenditure, but any word on or updates on that?
now the only thing that will actually not run through the school system, we'll never see that funding, and we're grateful our sheriff's department has that kind of portion with us. I 100% support them adding an additional SRO to our high schools, though. That is a huge need for us. Once we know details, we have been promised that we will not be, hurt's the wrong word, but not eligible for funds like there was with the SRO grant several years ago. We already had SRO, so we weren't eligible for the SRO grant. We've been told that's not the case, but the funding is not necessarily to add where you already have an extra one. And so we're going to have to look at how do we organize the staffing so that we can still use that funding to meet the goals.
Okay, thank you. Now I have it's a little bit longer, kind of a comment and then a question and then maybe a proposal. As I was going through the detail for Fund 177, a couple things popped out at me. Smyrna, Oakland, Riverdale popped out a lot. And so what I did is go through and basically took the original amount we financed for each of the schools, added in the amount from 177 for the 5-year period, and then came up with, for example, for Oakland, we started out with $61,580,000. I added in all the Oakland additional expenditures over the 5-year period, okay, and came up with $78,140,000 roughly. Okay, for Riverdale, I came up with $72,790,300. Okay, so a fairly significant increase from the 56 million. Okay, that the commission financed. For Smyrna, you started with financing $38,420,000 roughly. And if you add in the additional items from 177, you come up to about $50,920,000, give or take. Okay, so you have a total, if you add Smyrna, Riverdale, Oakland together, of about $200 million. So if you take the additional amounts, okay, that are provided for in 177, it appears over that, for the additions, renovations, plus those Fund 177 capital projects, you would add about 45,500,000-ish. Fair enough? Okay, so, and the thought comes to mind that these are basically set up over a 20-year period. The high schools are set up for about a 20-year period. So one of the questions I have is that, does that cover those 3 high schools for the next 20 years? In other words, there's no significant additional, in other words, if I take the 156 plus the 45-ish, okay, and I come up with the 201, is that going to cover Smyrna, Oakland, and Riverdale for the next 20 years so that, so that the school board's not going to be back in here saying, we need more money for Smyrna, Riverdale, and Oakland? Is that fair to say that does everything you can do to those 3 schools?
Barring some societal change such as us closing off all the entrances to our buildings, like 20 years ago, that wasn't on the table, and that's a huge cost, or an HVAC, something going down. You're just gonna have your normal maintenance of painting, floors, those normal type of things with a building that old we would look at.
So with that said, I'd like to open it up for discussion, because I do view it as a discussion. There are folks who've been here a whole lot longer than I have. If we were to increase our borrowing, okay, from 156 by the 45 to go up to 201, and then we put that, and Michael can correct me if I'm misstating this, putting that in the general fund, we move 9 pennies from the Education Capital Projects Fund. Okay, at that point, you guys are basically covered for those 3 schools, correct?
We would be.
Okay, and so at that point, we move 9 pennies over. That reduces the projected tax increase in the general fund. Okay, that still leaves in your capital, Education Capital Projects Fund, the adequate facilities tax plus a penny. And I believe you have an adequate fund balance to cover the items for at least a year, if not more. And I would propose that we revisit it probably in a year or 2. Okay? The catch is, from your perspectives, the excess projects are funded out of your general, either your school or you come to us for the general fund. Okay? Then, the only, that puts a lot more burden on us in a sense, which I think we're happy to take a look at. If funds were to come in, we would then approve them for these items. The money would already be here, okay? The tax rate would have gone down by, I guess, Michael, 8 pennies plus or 8 pennies minus debt service, something along those lines. Leaving 1 penny in there. And then basically, the only downside really is if there were to be a big high school show up in the next 3-4 years, the question is not so much, would then be, can you finance it? Adequately provide the money to do that. So that's kind of a, if you have thoughts, certainly happy to hear it, but I'd also like to open the door if other commissioners have ideas too. It's, think of it as fully funding Oakland, Riverdale, and Smyrna for the additions, the renovations, and the capital projects. So we're done with those 3 high schools 20 years. Okay? And we can tweak this. I'm certainly open for lots of critique. But this is one way, and then basically that goes in the general fund. You move the pennies, you save a little bit of money on the potential tax increase. But it does put a little bit of burden on you and your fund balance, and potentially puts a burden on us down the road.
Excuse me a second, Mayor Carr.
Mr. Chairman, I want to make sure I'm following order. I would like to ask Commissioner Irvin a clarifying question with regards to his inquiry to Dr. Sullivan, if that's permissible.
Mr. Irvin.
What you're doing is the potential for your solution here for moving 9 pennies out of capital projects was that, if I heard you correctly, it may constrain in 2 or 3, 4 years a major capital building project like another high school, correct? And so so you're saying one of the downsides to this, there may be some constraints there downstream if we do this, correct?
I think that's about the only one I've come up with so
Well, I'm just making
far.
sure I understood you correctly.
Yes, if there were to be, you know, and now, there's a lot of factors that kind of go into this. The penny's probably growing. Hopefully, our house is more in order. We can better afford, they will have used their fund balance. Those 9 pennies would have been, covered the essential items, okay? But you're correct that it's possible that we get 3 or 4 years down the road for a high school, and there's more of a challenge than we had hoped for.
So this is my question, thank you. I just want to make sure I understood that. So Dr. Sullivan, 3 months ago, plus or minus, you became before Health and Ed, and you gave a best projection about what you thought you were going to need in the form of borrowing money to fund the growth of our school systems to the next 5 years. If I'm not mistaken, you said prior to the appropriation of the $156 million, which was included, you're going to need $745 million. And that included another major high school, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so in the 3 months since you've done that, has anything changed in that regard that we need to know about in considering of this proposal?
Right. No, sir. Prioritizing it, our elementaries first, a high school on the north end and a middle school on the south side are needed yesterday, but we realize it's several years away. So no, sir, that has not changed.
Okay, thank you.
In the time frame, I'm sorry, I don't have that in front of me. For the high school, is how many years?
High school would be after we ask for the elementary school and go to the bond market, so the high school really is needed tomorrow, but it will probably be a request in 2 years. Our board will have to make that determination on what is their priority between a middle school to relieve Blackman and Rockville, the 2 biggest middle schools in the state, or to relieve Stewart's Creek and Smyrna and Laverne, which are 3 of the top 10 high schools in the state.
25, 26, 26, 27.
We would probably come and ask 25, 26.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the commissioners on this committee? Please.
One clarification, I think we would have to ask for one of those in the 24-25 school year, because the elementary would be 23-24. We would need one of those the next year. We wouldn't ask for both of them in the 25-26 school year.
Have y'all, I guess, where are you in terms of kind of assessing, I know you came up with numbers, I don't have it in front of me, the numbers for the intermediate and for the high school?
As far as what type of schools we would need there?
The cost.
Oh, cost, when you're looking at a high school, I don't have those numbers in front of me either. I have to pull them up to see what they are. Just roughly off the top of my head, high school or middle school would be 75 million, probably more than that. In high school, you're looking at 130 or 140. And that's truly off recollection of our last conversations. That hasn't been part of the conversation in the last couple months.
Okay, so financing another 200 unless reserves are built back up.
Correct.
Y'all hear any more discussion or questions about the general purpose school fund for 2023-24? Do I hear a recommendation? Commissioner Chairman Gooch.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Fund 141, I move that we appropriate $518,420,946, which will be 0.5927 cents on the tax rate, 2023-24.
I have a motion. Do I hear a second? I have a second. Discussion. Hearing none, call roll.
Commissioner Sereno,
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch,
Yes.
Commissioner Harris,
Yes.
Commissioner Irvin,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner P.
Yes.
Pass.
Motion carries. Now, let's go to our second item, which is the Educational Capital Projects Fund for 2023-24. Sullivan, you want to?
So I'll go back to just kind of where we started. So we started our initial request only using maintenance of effort with a good faith request to keep our 177 the same. Just in the initial conversation, I don't feel comfortable addressing all of those questions, as I would need guidance from our board as well. But just our very first thing that I could see that is going to come up to an issue is the 23-24. If we moved all those pennies away, one, I think we have more than at this point covered what our high school additions have costed. So I understand that's part of it, but in being a good collaborative partner, I don't feel like that's the best aspect for us to take as a school system. The first aspect I see as Laverne High School is on our 5-year capital projects that we would look at a $3.575 million from Fund 141, which we would be right back into the discussion we've had today about taking 141 in shared pennies. We would then look at several other HVAC projects and those type of things. Yes, we could take some of those out of fund balance. That does hurt our ability to help pay for any type of elementary school. I don't think we have a fund balance to be able to do all of that, but if we have a healthy fund balance, I definitely think we need to request with what we feel comfortable in working with Michael and our board and Brian about. I think that takes that argument out. So you will see we have large requests. Any decrease in pennies are going to mean that those projects are going to further fall off. I do agree with when we are starting to look at borrowing, that's a discussion that I would love to have as far as guidance from the commission. We try to keep our numbers as low as possible with our request while also making sure that our architects give us the best number of seats and address the concerns that we have. In the future, if the commission wants us to look at adding capital projects to any renovation request, that's something we can look at and give different proposals. But that wasn't the direction that I think the commission originally last year looked at. It was strictly for additional number of seats and renovations. It wasn't to include all the additional buildings. So you kind of see all of our requests. Bringing up Oakland, for example, Oakland is 3 years away, and so theoretically we would have to remove Laverne High School's 3.75 to fund Oakland's that is a priority that is 3 years away, not this year. So that's just kind of my initial first thoughts of moving those pennies away.
Any questions from the commissioners? Commissioner Irvin?
Yeah, so why were some of them delayed and some not? I mean, there's some kind of odd things in here. The Smyrna High School HVAC addition is getting HVAC in 2026. And in other words, I'm sure that there's kind of a reason for a lot of this. What I was trying to do or suggest is that rather than try to sort this out, kind of over time, and we just figure out some way to come up with a number. Maybe it's not 45, maybe it's a different one. but that's what the number is indicated by your chart, okay, to take all these out. At that point, you're left with a fairly modest, okay, draw against your fund balance in the first year, because that pulls out a lot of Oakland, Riverdale, Smyrna, I believe, okay? And then, correct me if I'm wrong, but if it's like, at that point, your you financed the Oakland, Riverdale, Smyrna, you've added everything in, you've got it lined up properly over the 20-year period, okay, because that's the period you indicated we wouldn't have to do anything with. And then beyond that, it's financed over that period, okay? So I'm trying to figure out, you're using your fund balance for the hopefully relatively small number. I mean, yes, you had a little bit, you had some in Laverne, but you still have adequate facilities tax, okay? And you get to keep a penny, you know, not insignificant dollars, okay? So I'm trying to figure out a way to get you basically where I think you want to be, okay, to make this a little more rational in terms of Oakland, Riverdale, and Smyrna, and then move it to finance that, drop the financing cost to basically whatever it is on the 45 million. So we're not using current pennies, we're using financed pennies, which reduces the current cost. You following what I'm saying?
I am.
No?
Yeah.
Okay. And so I'm trying to get a sense for, does that work? You know, you can talk to your finance director, maybe you need a brief time to talk with him about it, but that seems to get you to where you want to be. The only, as the mayor pointed out, the only risk is 2 or 3, 4 years out when you come in for intermediate and whatever, if there's not adequate funds, fund balance, or financing capacity, okay, or theoretically, you know, you could be looking at a tax adjustment, theoretically. So I'd appreciate your thoughts, anybody else's thoughts.
So my kind of initial thought is, Brian, what would 1 penny bring? 1.6 million? If we had 1 penny left in, what will we have?
It's almost 1.5. Hold on, I just ran the numbers, so that's what I was running. So a penny would bring $1,496,120.64. Adequate facilities or school facilities tax next year for 177 and is budgeted at $2.4 million, with also the reduction of the other associated revenues that are associated with property tax. And this is a rough estimate because they're all ratios. It would be roughly $3,968,856.14 of total revenue to 177 if we moved, I believe you asked for 9 pennies.
So in no certain terms, no, I do not support that. Over the last couple years, we've had the bull and nickel, the 5.5 cents. Last year, we moved 7 cents of our own GPS funding. This will be moving backwards in our GPS fund. I understand the county's pull in trying to keep property tax as low as possible, but I also feel like we have a duty to take care of our buildings. And with 200 million, only having 3 million a year, we could have one HVAC system go out at a school and we aren't doing anything else the rest of the year. That's just my initial feedback on looking at it.
You would have your fund balance and then you would have the ability to come to us, correct?
Correct. At the same time that I would also be asking for new additions. So basically, that's kind of what it looks like. It looks like the old proverbial, we're kicking the can yet again, and school system has TISA, so let's use that to take care of some of their needs. And that is not what has been the priority, and it has not been, you don't want to say negotiations, but that has not been the conversations that we've been trying to address some of ours through this budget preparation. If that had been the case, I would have asked for more than maintenance of effort or asked for more in some of those.
Chairman Gooch.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It was a number years ago, and Robert, Chairman, you remember, we added this 177 fund to, excuse me, fund stuff like this. to keep our older buildings up to date, and that there would be a fund there that the school could go to and use maintenance, new roof, air conditioning, so forth and so on. And it's almost a sacred cow that that fund has been there, and I think that it's worked for all these years. And so I'm just very reluctant to take that down to a penny and then relying on ending fund balance and having to come to us to make up that difference. I think that, if it's my understanding, that the school board in the near future may use your ending fund balance for helping to build a school. And so that's where I'm leaning, is to protect this fund the way it is, 177, and to keep the healthy fund balance for a possible new school. That's just my thoughts. And I think that the 177 fund has worked well for all these number of years.
Since you mentioned me remembering, I do, and part of the problems that we were running to, Commissioner Irvin, was I remember some of our schools were actually having mold in the ceilings where we had leaky roofs. I don't know if you've walked through Riverdale and Oakland and Smyrna and saw catch basins and trash cans under leaky roofs. That was the kind of problem we were having to deal with, and they were having to wait because we didn't have the money in the budget to address these. And that's why that fund was basically put in there, kind of a preemptive thing, and it served us pretty well. Now, the downside of it is we put the money in there. They decide how to spend it. We can't prioritize and say, okay, I'll give you this money if it goes to Oakland. I'll give you this money if it goes to Smyrna. I'll give you this money if it goes to the HVA system there. That's the school board's prerogative. We fund it, and then they decide where to spend that money. Now, we may not like it in the future, and we can certainly give them feedback on projects like that if we have a problem with it. But all in all, I have to agree with Chairman Gooch. It's been a good thing for us because it's saved us money in the long run on some of these hefty repairs we were having to do in the past. Chairman Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not for taking pennies out of capital projects. What I am for is I'd really like to see us revamp our bidding process on some of these things as far as roofing and HVAC. I don't think we work well together as a commission, and like he said, we can't tell you what to do. You know, but we do provide you with money, and I think we need to look at the purchasing, look at the bid process on some of these high dollar items, because I'm not real comfortable. We don't ever see anything except an amendment that comes through the county commission saying, give us, you know, $3 million or whatever. And I am not insinuating that there is anything, but I think this commission, and I spoke to many commissioners, we need to be more involved in the process of how you are purchasing and attaining monies, attaining bids for the capital projects.
Would you like to?
Yeah. So it is definitely a partnership, and in part of that partnership, Commissioner P mentioned last week about roofing, so I've already had one conversation with the roofing group. We're going to do a meeting hopefully in July, and then kind of move forward from there. There's pros and cons to both of them. I don't want to speak for the board and what we ultimately would choose to do, but that has already been discussed and is in the works.
Gooch.
To move this forward, Mr. Chair, I'll move that to Fund 177, fund it $18,088,561, which is 0.10 cents to the tax rate 2324.
Okay, I have a recommendation, a motion. Do I hear a second?
Mr. Gooch, can you say that amount again?
Fund 177, $18,088,561, which is 10 cents on the rate. What I'm looking.
Where are you seeing that? I'm not seeing that. I'm seeing 18,454,881.
We gave a revised handout that should have been in there. We had a revised amount, but it should be, the number I have is what Commissioner Gooch has.
Okay.
It should have been in the back of your book. We gave a revised, or on the budget summary, I gave a revised budget summary at the last budget meeting, I think on May 23rd. It's actually going to be in one of the first pages. And at the top, it should say, I think, as of May 31st, May 23rd, maybe. Should be a budget summary with all the funds.
That was the other portion of the penny we
Yeah,
gave
that-
up. Yes.
That was, the number you had was before we moved a full penny.
Oh, okay. Well, then, I second.
Yeah,
I
it's on-
second.
Okay, thank you. I think it's on page 5 if you, from the very beginning. But yeah, I think that record reflects the penny that we moved.
Okay, I have a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any more discussion? Call roll, Mark.
Commissioner Sereno,
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch,
Yes.
Commissioner Harris,
Yes.
Commissioner Irvin,
No?
Commissioner Johnson,
No.
Commissioner P.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-2.
Okay. Dr. Sullivan, thank you.
All right. Thank you all.
That's one hurdle. All right, next is a review of the 2023-24 other budgets as necessary. So at this time, I'll recognize you, Michael.
At this time, I'd like to, before we get into that, if I could point out the handouts and tell y'all what those are. So I gave 3 documents. And the first one I'll start with, I'll hold it up. It says estimated change in fund balance as of May 31st, 2023. Looks like this right here. I had some questions from some commissioners of what our fund balances were as of today. And I did it as of May 31st when we closed the month, so that technically they're as of yesterday. But this lists all the budgeted funds, so I just wanted y'all to have this as of yesterday. This does not take into account the budget in front of you. That's just where we are today currently. The next handout I gave you is the most current copy of a summary of the county general fund of the budget working copy that we're working on now. It reflects all of the changes that this committee has made to date. However, since our last meeting, I have made 2 changes, and I want to communicate those with y'all now. One change was a revised health department grant. That grant was already approved, but that grant is for an additional $500 of revenue and expenditure. So I've corrected that amount. And additionally, since we met last, we got the actual amount of our next year's Homeland Security grant. That is included in the numbers in front of you on the summary page as well. That also has a revenue and expense, so it doesn't affect the deficit or anything like that, but it saves us an amendment in August and allows the Emergency Management Department to go ahead and spend that grant starting in July. So I have added those 2 things since we last met. The mayor has changed his recommendation to also include those since we've got that accurate grant amount that we were waiting on. We just didn't have at the last time we met. But barring those 2 changes, the other changes that this committee has made are reflected in these totals. And I want to point out 2 things here. The first thing I want to point out is the current budget we're on. We started with a $21.1 million deficit, and we are currently at a budgeted deficit of $31.1 million. And then I've also included the pennies that would need to balance this fund, and those pennies are 23.661 or 23.602, but I've rounded to 23.61. And so that is all included in this sheet in front of you. And then lastly, in front of you is I gave the county general fund balances of some surrounding counties and ours as of last year ending FY22. Those are the audited fund balances. The reason I did FY22 is because that's where I could pull all the audit reports as of then. And so I also have our fund balance as of today, which is around 26%. But I've included Williamson and Hamilton, which are AAA rated counties. And then I've also included Sumner and Wilson County, just trying to give counties of comparable size and what their percentage and dollar amounts of their fund balances are, just for comparison totals.
So you're saying 38.55% was what it was last year?
That's what we ended with, yes. That's what the
we're-
audited ending, and to-
Saying we're at 26 right now.
That's correct. And one of the reasons that deficit has dropped so much is, if y'all remember last fall, we moved approximately $8 million out of the unassigned general fund balance to go to Fund 171 for a potential Del Webb Public Health and Safety building. Now, we have subsequently moved some of that Del Webb money to fund the cost overruns of the first 5 public health and safety buildings, but that's the reason, one of the reasons that deficit has dropped so much. Now, keep in mind also, anytime we approve a grant, so let's say, for example, I think last month we approved a Doors of Hope pass-through grant that was $710,000. That had a revenue and an expense, but when we're looking at a fund balance comparison, you're comparing your fund balance to your expenditures. So when your expenditures go up and your fund balance doesn't change, that percentage is going to drop. So this also reflects all of the budget amendments we've passed to date this year, including the grants, including matching grants, including anything like that. But that's where we stand as of today.
So my question is, keeping our AAA rating, it's not one factor, it's various factors, is that correct?
That's correct.
So if we were not at 30%, does that automatically kick us out?
No, but it is a heavy factor.
But our other factors are pretty good too, though. Like we have the ability to raise taxes, we have a healthy in-funding balance. Would those things not be
They
considered?
are all a factor, but if you go read the latest Moody's report, it heavily mentions our general fund balance, and it does not mention our debt service fund balance like it does our general fund balance.
You're saying for us to operate without a deficit, to get up over 30%, we need 23.602 cents?
Make sure I'm reading this number right, 23.61 cents would balance the general fund. Let me read this because I want to be sure I'm getting this. That would get you to around 28.5%. That still doesn't get you to 30. What would then get you there would hopefully, we don't end at a budgeted deficit of 31 million this year, which is what we're budgeted. So if we came a couple million to the good, that would then get you to the 30.
Question, Mayor.
Commissioner, you got a tiger by the tail. Go ahead. You can't let go, you can't not let go.
I know. Here's my question, Mayor. So we got hit because of the public safety buildings. That's what hit us on our debt, right?
Partly.
Amen. Okay, I understand that. But what I don't understand is, are we got 2 more public safety buildings going up. Are they coming this year or is it next year? Because, I mean, I'm looking at those public safety buildings as another major slam.
So that's a good question. I'm going to get Michael to help me for just a second. But remember, the public safety buildings are built with the ARPA money. It is the ongoing recurring costs associated with funding those or staffing those that is the issue here. So slam is probably a heavier word or harsher word than I would use, but that is something that Michael and I have talked about that's in consideration with what we have proposed with this year's budget and the property tax rate that we are proposing. It's with every bit of that in mind. It's specifically so we don't get, this being year 1, we don't get slammed in year 2, 3, or 4. And so we're trying to set it right with the deficit that we have, with the fund balance that's underfunded, and make sure that we meet our debt obligations. And so it's all that combined. I think that's what Michael's saying, with a heavy emphasis on fund balance. And these are my numbers, but look at it like 60% fund balance, 20% with ability to raise revenue, and 20% with regard to expenditures, that kind of thing. So it's that kind of weighted. But in the end, that is our goal, is to retain that AAA bond rating. It's a heavy part of the emphasis here, because in this economic environment, it's very important. It wasn't 2 years ago like it is now, but it's very important right now. I hope I've answered your question.
I mean, it does. I know we're in a bad spot here. So I know the public safety buildings is something we pretty much already agreed to do. But I know the first two came in pretty much way over budget.
They did.
Way over budget. And I'm assuming that just the recurring costs that would come with those is, not counting anything but just firemen, is about $1 million for each
Correct, but
building, not counting other stuff like equipment or any of that.
But yes, and you're absolutely on track. But I'm here to tell you that Michael and I we're not just doing this for 23, 24. This is setting the table so we don't have to do this again. I'm telling you, I'm not coming back before this body in 2 or 3 years saying, we need a 5 or 10 cent property tax increase. We're not doing that. We're working this out so that we don't have to do that, because it's not right. And I've said this 1,000 times, but it bears repeating. It's not right that the property taxpayers of this county shoulder the burden of the growth that this county is experiencing. And that's what this is. And you know, we've talked about kicking the can down the road, and I've got to give credit to the mayors that preceded me and the county commissions that preceded you. They did the best they could, thinking that we were going to get some assistance, Commissioner Harris. We didn't get the assistance. And so now we got to pick up the can. But when we pick up the can, we're going to set it right so we don't have to do this again. And this isn't just about 23, 24. It's 25, 26, 26, 27, and on.
Well, one of the things, a lot of people don't understand how our tax rate is, where we sit on that. You know, we're at 1.6, and some more. I'm just saying 1.6. All right. Hamilton, which is the closest we even have to us, is 2.25, 2.35. So we need to get that information to our constituents that, you know, we're not, even though this is a substantial amount, it still puts us way below where most people are. Am I correct on that?
You are all over it. We are not just the lowest in Middle Tennessee as a tax rate at $1.61 per $100 assessed value. We're way underneath the average. I mean, you're looking at Wilson counties at $2. You're looking at Sumner counties at $2.32. You're looking at Davidson County. I mean, who wants to compare yourself to that at what, $2.60 or $2.90? So we're at $1.61. We're way underneath anybody else. And if we were to do the 26 cents, which is what I'm proposing, we will still be one of the lowest, if still not the lowest, property tax rate in Middle Tennessee. So again, great credit goes to my predecessors and to the county commissions before you, but we've kicked this growth can down the road far enough. And Michael has done just a phenomenal job putting together a very conservative budget that maintains our ability to pay our bills with a good credit rating and still grow this county like it needs to.
So my last question is 26.84% tax increase, which is what you're proposing.
Cents, not percent.
Sorry.
Thank you.
My question then is that enough? Because you've said it numerous times you don't want to come back here next year. Well, neither do any of us. I can promise you that. So is that enough? Do we need to look at more than that, or is that pretty much, or is that just a very conservative number?
In my estimation, that is a conservative number, and Michael and I have talked about this. But if you wanted to give us some wiggle room, an extra penny would not hurt, just to be candid. Just to be honest, and the wiggle room is not that we spend it, but I really want to make sure that we have that fund balance back up in the mid-30s, and it stays there, and that we don't have year-over-year deficits, because we've been working. Every budget has began with a deficit. That's not a healthy, conservative way to manage our finances. I'm not saying we need to have big surpluses, but we need to. That's not how any of us manage our personal affairs. And so we shouldn't expect the county to manage its affairs in the same way. So I would love an extra penny, but I'm not going to ask for it, because I promised this commission I was going to bring you the most conservative budget that I could construct, and that's what this is. But if you were to say, Mayor, would you could you use an extra penny for for some little wiggle room? The answer is yes. Michael?
I'd just like to add one thing. So this budget takes care of staffing, and again, it's not just fire. You know, it's the EMS.
Yes.
And things that go with that. But one of the things this budget does not include would be the Christiana and Del Webb that would come online not next year, but not this budget year we're talking about right now, but the budget year after that. And I believe that's what you're kind of referring to. And roughly a penny is about what it would take to fund the staff for those two buildings in the 24-25 budget year. Let me get my years correct. It's very, very close. I mean, within a few $1,000s. So I mean, I think we've tried to be conservative, where we think we can absorb those positions without any increase. But I will tell you that's based on hopefully revenue comes in strong. Hopefully we don't spend all of our expenditures. But roughly a penny would be about the same amount of staffing those buildings.
For both, Michael, or for one?
No, I think it would be for both, because keep in mind the penny grows every year too. So I think based on some other factors, I think one penny would cover those two buildings for the staffing.
About 1.1 for 15 firefighters, right?
Correct, but we already, I do believe there's some EMS for one of the stations. I'm looking in the back at our EMS director, and so I think it would get really close to covering it for those two buildings, because I believe Christiana already has some EMS. That's correct, okay. I got a correction back there. So I think it would be really close, because the firefighters are around the 1.1 mark, and then you would bring on additional 8. I'm also looking, again, be 8 to cover for the two stations. And so once you brought those on, it would be really close to that 1.5, 1.6 penny range.
So
Take salaries and
ARCA,
benefits.
I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So ARCA funded how many public safety buildings?
5.
5?
For,
The only one that did not.
2 million over on each one.
I'm sorry?
We came in about 2 million over budget on the first two, and we took that from number 5, right?
We took it from Del Webb. You appropriated $8 million from Del Webb, for Del Webb, which is what Michael was talking about earlier.
let me make a clarification. So ARPA funded all 6.
That's true.
So we moved $24 million of revenue loss last year into the county general fund, which was from ARPA. We subsequently moved $8 million of that out to 171. You are correct on the first two being over budget by around that $2 million, a little over $2 million mark. Then the third and fourth one is what we moved the Del Webb money for, which would be Las Casas and Walter Hill. So currently, right now, we would have enough money left to do Christiana, and I believe this body passed back in the fall. If we did Del Webb, it would be through a future debt issuance. But we would start those two projects next year after Walter Hill and Las Casas are done, was I think the direction we were given.
Okay. So let me recap, and I'll stop talking.
You're fine,
Mayor's
take your time.
Sir?
Take your time.
So, Mayor, you're asking for 26.84 pennies, but that kind of figure really probably needs to be 27.84. That gives us room to where we might not have to raise taxes for the 2 and 3 years.
Well, let me be.
Second year, third year.
Yeah, let me be real clear. I proposed 26.
Yes, I understand.
Right. Well, I'm going to look to Michael, who's I'm doing the handoff here, Commissioner, because he does the points. So anything after the decimal is his responsibility. So
Based on the changes this committee has made, we had some revisions. The mayor's proposal would be 26.13. It went down a little bit. It'd be 26.13, and let me read those. It would be 23.61 pennies for the County General Fund 101, and it would be, let me double check my number here, 2.52 pennies for the Ambulance Service Fund.
That's 26.62?
I have 26.13.
Well, let's review, please. You got 23.61, and then you got 2.52.
I have 26.13.
You're correct. My apologies. So 26.13, Commissioner.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
No, not at all. That's why we're here. We want to get these questions answered. And speaking of those, are there any more review, or is Chairman Phillips?
We talk millions and millions of dollars, and it just blows my mind. It has for over 30 years, though, but it continues to get more and more confusing, of course, as time goes by. Last year, our property tax rate was $2.21. We reduced that to $1.61, and it's in the neighborhood of 60 cents. So we're going to go back and get somewhere in the neighborhood of 26, 27 cents back on their property tax rate. So even with that, we're going to be somewhat around 30 cents, still 30 cents lower than we were this time last year. So, you know, I'd like to see in that chart, Michael, that you've got Williamson, Hamilton, Summer, and Wilson County, and also including Rutherford County, not only the fund balance, but maybe what their property tax rate is, and if we know maybe what they're proposed, what they're talking about, if that's possible, that would give.
I can definitely have that for you next Thursday. We have a meeting on June 8th. I believe it's the 8th next Thursday. I don't know if any of those counties are under reappraisal. So that would be the other thing. If they're under reappraisal, like we were last year, that would be hard for me to guess what their tax rate would drop to. So I think that would be the only caveat. I couldn't give you something super accurate if one of those is under reappraisal.
Well, if I might jump in here for just a second, Commissioner, this is something that I follow regularly because I think it's important we know what the surrounding counties of Middle Tennessee are doing. So if you'll give me about 5 or 10 minutes, I can have you those numbers because I've got them stored away on my phone. I just need to find them. But I literally looked up the tax rate of the surrounding counties, and all these counties listed here were among those counties. I included also Murray and Coffee and some of the others. So if you can give me a few minutes, and I'll be glad to, if the Chairman doesn't mind, we can revisit this in a few minutes, and I can get that for you.
Whatever you want to do. I'd rather don't want to put you out. And that information, I think, is excellent type of information to share at our public hearing that we have coming up here shortly.
I want to go back to something that Chairman Harris said, is that it's important that our constituency, the people of Rutherford County that we're working for, understand, you know, comparatively what we're trying to do and how long we have kept this tax rate low. And but through some circumstances, quite bluntly, through no fault of our own, I mean, you guys have done a yeoman's job for years, but you can't do it alone. And but let me get that information here in the next 10 minutes, and if the Chairman decides, I can bring that back to your attention. I'll be glad to.
We will. As a matter of fact, I've got it too, and I'm looking for it myself. Something I will point out, I came on this commission in 1998. At that time, our tax rate was $2.78, and each year that we could, we always went to the certified rate, which has dropped our rate. And that doesn't mean your taxes didn't increase because of reappraisals. You know, like last year, everybody thinks the county had a big tax increase. We had no increase in revenue from those reappraisals. That was all state mandated. Every 4 years, everybody gets reappraised. So those reappraisals, when we set back to the certified rate, there was no increase in revenues to the county. So you're correct. And as far as these other counties that are surrounding us, give us a moment or two. And I'll tell you what, let's take a 5-minute break while we're looking for that information.
Can I say just one more thing before we go?
Yes, Chairman.
The one thing that I'd want also people out there to listen to is our school system. Hamilton County school system's in the bottom 10% of the entire state. So I think that also is something people need to understand too, is how our school system is so much better. Just giving them the props. Thank you.
Michael, before we take a break, we've talked about future planning, and I know the mayor has put together a budget, and that budget requires a tax increase, but everybody knew that it was coming. We were guessing months ago that it would be in the neighborhood of 30 cents. And of course, what he's proposing is less than that, and all of those things are admirable, and I really appreciate that. But could you give us an indication of funding those public safety buildings and staffing those public safety buildings? If we were to go ahead and do that right now, how many pennies would that add? Would it be a penny and a half or a penny or something like that? So if you could put that together.
I can tell you, it would probably, if you had to add it today and staff them all today, for staffing and operating costs, you'd probably need to add a penny and a half or 2 pennies. Would probably be in the neighborhood of there somewhere.
So if we added that penny that the mayor was talking about that he would take, or even a penny and a half on top of that, we would not have that discussion next year as it relate to funding or staffing those buildings. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
You could, I will say this, the other option you would have is if you added that penny this year, you would have the potential to use one-time money this year that you could potentially shift to, I don't know if it would fully cover because we haven't bid it, we don't know the costs, but that could shift to fund, because remember Del Webb's not fully funded anymore. So you could potentially, you would have a one-time penny because you wouldn't hire those people this year. You could shift a portion of that over to Del Webb without having to borrow. So I mean, that would allow you some flexibility there to not have to pay interest on that.
That, you know, the deal is.
Let me interject something here. We have got the information we're looking for. If that'll help, if you still got a question, I want you to continue though. Mayor, you recognize him.
So Chairman Phillips, of course, everybody knows the county rate is 161. The Williamson County rate is $1.88. The Hamilton County rate is $2.23. The Sumner County rate is $2.26. And the Wilson County rate is $1.91. And just so you know, where that information came from was the Tennessee Comptroller, and I think we can rely on him to be accurate.
The other two that I would add is Davidson, I think is $2.95, and Shelby is $3.39.
You know, I'm not belittling anybody or anything, but we talk about when it comes to staffing a school, Commissioner, when we talk about staffing a school, the latest I heard, it was $3 million to staff a school. So to build it is a one-time expense. We have to pay for it over a period of years, but to staff that school is a recurring expense of $3 million plus bucks, and I think it's probably more than that now as it relates to a high school. But those are funds that we don't even question. You know, we build a high school, we know we're going to staff it, or a school, we know we're going to staff it. I know there's state funds that come in that help us offset that, but we still have some a cost that's additional to that. And my thoughts as years have passed is that there's nothing more important to us than public safety. As an example, SROs and what's happening statewide on those type of things. So these public safety buildings, in my mind, is extremely important. As the mayor has said before, we are moving toward full-time firefighters, full-time ambulance services, and expanding those services. And those are critical, in my mind, to improve public safety as we go forward and as we continue to grow. So looking at even adding an additional penny or a penny and a half as far as time goes by, we're going to we're probably going to benefit to that. This is the Budget Committee meeting, but I'm thinking that we need to give that some serious thought, and maybe, Michael, just come back with what that might look like as far as our ending fund balances and funding those buildings instead of having to come back and do that next year. I'd like for us to take a look at that. So at our next meeting, if you could have that available, maybe not for the committee, but for me, I'd like to take a look at that and just to see what that looked like.
Okay, we've been reviewing our other budgets as necessary. Are there any other budgets we'd like to discuss? Or any changes you would like to make to any of the budgets we've reviewed up to now? If not, I'm ready to move to item 5, which is to propose a 2023-24 budget for publication. And basically what that would be our attempt at showing the public what we would propose the tax rate to be, that would be advertised in the local papers to let our public see what the proposed tax rate would be. And at this time, I'll open the floor for any discussion or a motion. As it stands right now with all the changes that we have made, Michael, what is the proposed tax rate? I know we just calculated that a minute ago. I think you said 26.13.
Okay, so let me clarify a couple things. With all the changes, and if we were to balance both the general fund and the ambulance service fund, the mayor proposed a 26.13 cent increase, and that would bring us to $1.8775. So a little under 1.88. So 1.8775 would be what the mayor's proposed.
Still the lowest rate in Middle Tennessee.
Could you, Mr. Chair, go through each, and what would that, I guess, what would that mean for each fund? So,
Okay.
for example,
You want me to walk through each fund? Would that help?
Yeah.
Okay, let me just, so to start with, the general fund, after the budget committee's changes, and keep in mind, we made a couple changes, no large ones. Really one of the largest changes was this committee added a youth service officer position, and then we made several other small changes. But with that, the deficit from the budget committees after all their changes was $35,311,732, and that would take approximately 23.61 pennies to balance. So that's where we got there. Then the next fund, which would be...
Okay, I'm sorry. So, say that again, we're adding, are we adding to the 0.4762?
Correct.
And so
That would bring the total number of pennies for the general fund to 7.7123, so 71.23 pennies. And if that were to go into effect, I've also calculated what a potential fund balance would be. So if we were to balance that fund with that recommended increase in pennies, it would bring us to approximately a 28.5% fund balance. Now keep in mind, like I said earlier, that's a little below where we wanted to be at 30, but keep in mind I would anticipate our revenues to come in a little bit better than our $31 million, because that assumes we hit our $31 million deficit, which I don't think we will. So I think once revenues come in a little bit better than what we've anticipated, that would bump us up to the 30 where we needed to be, or right at there. So that would be the summary for the general fund. And then if we move on fund by fund, the solid waste fund, it does not have property tax, and that fund was balanced when it was presented to you all. The next one is the ambulance service fund. That fund this year has 4.28 pennies, and the mayor's recommended increase would be 2.52 pennies for a total of 6.8 pennies. That would balance that fund. And so they would have adequate fund balance in that fund as well. Then the next fund is our Industrial Economic Development Fund. That fund does not have property tax. Our Special Purpose Fund, which is where we have our DEA money, where we work joint cases, where the Sheriff's Office work joint cases with them, that fund does not have property tax as well. 122 is our Drug Control Fund. That fund also does not have property taxes. And let me add that 121 and 122 look like they're operating at a deficit, and that's just because we've received excess revenues in the past that we haven't spent, so they're budgeted to spend this year, and that's very normal. The next one is the Highway Fund, and right now they have approximately 0.72 pennies, so that they don't have a full penny. And that fund came to us with a small surplus of $79,326. They do have around a little over 100% fund balance. The schools, which you just approved earlier tonight, have a reduction of 10 pennies from their general purpose school fund. So that would bring them to approximately 59.27 pennies. The school cafeteria fund, which does not have property tax, it was presented to you with a almost $4.5 million deficit. However, if you have over 3 months worth of expenditures in that fund, the USDA mandates that you have a plan to spend that down. Not that you must spend it down, but that you must have a plan. And I believe that is the school board's plan. I'm looking back there, they're also nodding. 177 you also approved tonight. That did have a reduction of 1 penny. So they went from 11 pennies down to 10 pennies in that fund that you approved. And then debt service, we took the 11 pennies that we shifted from schools and shifted that down there along with the debt. So that would go from 28.73 pennies to 39.73 pennies. And I want to add one thing to debt service. It is going to show a deficit of $1.8 million, but keep in mind, we budgeted for a full year of the elementary costs in there as well for the $60 million, and we would anticipate the school system asking for that either next fall or next spring, depending on the timing of construction there. Also keep in mind, we did put enough in there. We do anticipate several smaller projects coming to the county, one being the I-24, I believe it's Buchanan Road interchange project. And I do believe we will have a little bit of revenue in there from this current fiscal year. So I think that fund will be very close to washing when it's all said and done, even though it shows a deficit there. Right now, that would put that fund balance at about 55%. We really want that to be around 65% or more, because that allows us to do things like we just did with the schools, which is issue a bond anticipation note, which saves us money. We don't have to go to a bank and get a bridge loan. We can have zero interest debt to ourselves. So I do want to point that out. So I think that will be a little healthier than 55% when it's all said and done when we close the year. That wraps up all of the funds, budgeted funds. I know I went through that quick, so I can circle back if you need me to.
Okay, and what was the ending fund balance percent for ambulance 118?
Okay. So are you asking with a increase in pennies?
Yes, as proposed.
So as proposed, that would bring them to approximately 47% fund balance. And again, for that fund, the reason it shows that is we were trying to not kick the can down the road for the anticipation, because if you remember, I budgeted some of those ambulance service. I believe there were 16 for the 2 new public health and safety buildings and 2 convalescent positions. I'm also looking at Brian back there. That's correct. And so one of the things we were trying to do, the reason it got to about 47 is we really want to make sure that coming next year, you're not coming back when we're doing Christiana or Del Webb. Or also keep in mind, they're funded a lot through patient charges. So, I mean, that has a lot of flux. It's not as secure as property tax. I mean, we hit the last 20 years, we hit 97, 98% on property tax every year. You'll see where I'll present that next Thursday. But patient charges fluctuate a little bit, so that's the reason that's at that percentage.
Yes, sir.
So in year 2 and 3, when the intermediate and the high school comes on board, that's funded how without, I'm just trying to get everybody on the same page, without a tax increase?
You're asking for a future school issuance, not next year, but the 24, 25 year?
Right, we've already got the additions, we've already got the elementary, plus a few things. In year, as Dr. Sullivan said, in year 2 or 3 from now, an intermediate comes online or gets bid, and then a high school gets bid. Same question as I was asking earlier, okay, or was trying to point out earlier, that's the risk. How is that risk mitigated by this chart, by adding these dollars? Do we build up, for example, would we be building up our fund balances? How would we be mitigating that risk in years 2 and 3 when an intermediate and a high school shows up, plus the additional cost of, as I forgot who pointed out, the cost of operating it coming online presumably a year or 2 later. So how is that mitigated?
So we do have, and that's a great question because we've talked about that. One of the things we do have is is at least one piece of debt, a refunding that we issued coming off the books in 24-25 or 25-26. And so one of the plans, and you can't ever guarantee that we won't have to come back for some type of additional funding. I mean, we plan as best we can, based on certain criteria. I mean, obviously, if interest rates go to 8%, and I was budgeting at 4%, that changes everything, right? But we do have one refunding of $88 million coming off in 25-26. It doesn't have a principal payment in 24-25, and so that was one of the things we were looking at. And then in subsequent years, we do have a few other debt issuances rolling off, and so I think that was one of the plans in combination with, the pennies that we're putting over there are growing every year, right? And so we budgeted for a full year of bond and interest payments on that $60 million with the hopes we wouldn't have a full year. And so some of those pennies would grow, and we would use that for that 24-25 or 25-26 debt issuance. Now, does that cover the entire $750 million 5-year plan? No, the answer is no. But that doesn't mean that they're coming with $750 million right away either. We could only go under the best information we had at the time. But we did have a plan to have some flexibility going into that 24-25 or 25-26 fiscal years. I hope that answers your question. I can't guarantee that it will fix it, mitigate the risk completely, but we were trying to do as best we could with not prematurely asking for more of a tax revenue.
Right, I understand. Basically, the risk is still there. We just have a few ways. Presumably, the penny grows a bit. We've got $88 million. We've got another $60 million we're going to earn probably a nice return on for a period of time. That's not quite the $200 million, but at least it might get us going on the debt service piece, if it's borrowed.
And I think
it still seems, on its face, it seems a little tight, but maybe not. It's hard to say.
It is, and I think the other thing, when the mayor discussed his budget proposal with me, I think one of the things that this body has shown they're still committed to is looking at some way to pay for growth, whether that be working with the state state legislators, or working with building and codes and all of those things to try to figure out a way to plug that gap. And so we didn't really have all those answers right now, so we kind of mitigated the risk the best we could based on the circumstances that we were dealt.
Yeah, so it's a conservative approach because we didn't plug those numbers in to this at all, and I really don't want to. I don't want to factor those in yet for the aforementioned reasons.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the commission? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion for a property tax rate for the 2023-24 budget. Do I hear a recommendation?
Parliamentary inquiry. Are we voting to send it to publication?
Yes, this would go to publication, and then it would come back after, let's say, we have a regular meeting on the 8th, but then on June 13th, we have a public hearing, at which time public has had a chance to look at what we have put out there. They can come here, anybody that wants to discuss it, we'll be given time to ask questions. After that, on the 14th, we review the questions that were given. Also, on the 21st of June, another meeting to review further if we need it. After that, the 29th. So you've actually got
So
5 more meetings.
So I will say, this will be for my office to put together the budget publication, go to the paper. I do believe that will run on the 13th. I'm also looking at, I think that's what they told us, it would run on the 13th. It's for public hearing. On the 21st is when you will vote on the actual tax levy resolution and the appropriations resolution to send to the full commission. The full commission is scheduled to meet on the 26th. I believe that's a Monday at 9 a.m. So this would not be the official vote on the resolution. You're voting for the publication that will go in the paper that will run on the 13th.
So this is not a recommendation, not approval. This is merely to send what we have put together so far to the paper so everybody can look at it, public comment.
Exactly. That's why I was mentioning, you've got 5 other meetings after
Thank you.
this, so.
Well, I know this is your first year, but to clarify, what you vote on tonight is pretty much what you're telling the public you're for, if that makes sense.
And then you may be wanting to get feedback from the public after you see hey, here's what we're throwing out there. And then you'll get feedback and have an opportunity to change your mind or not. But he's correct. What we propose is what I think you would want to support in the future.
Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Harris.
All right. I concur with Commissioner Gooch and Commissioner Irvin, but I've also looked at this budget 100 times too. So I am going to propose that we accept 26.13 increase pennies, which would raise the tax rate to 1.8775.
Okay. That is a motion. Michael?
Can we, if you don't mind, can we clarify for the minutes that the changing of where those funds are, where those pennies are going? Just for clarification, if I could read those out for
You
the
want to
minutes.
redo it?
No,
You talking about what you
he's
just went over?
wanting to read out where the breakdown of that
Yeah, I'm
is.
fine with that.
So this would be an additional 23.61 pennies to the county general fund, an additional 2.52 pennies for the ambulance fund 118, a reduction of 10 pennies from the general purpose school fund, a reduction of 1 penny from the educational capital projects fund, and an increase of 11 pennies for the general debt service fund.
That's what your proposal would do. Okay, and that's his proposal for the publication. Do I hear
That would be 1.8775?
That's correct.
Okay.
I just wanted to read that for the minutes for us, so we'll have it.
Okay, I have a motion on the floor to send this number to publication. Do I hear a second?
Mr. Chairman, this is just for the
This is for
publication for
publication.
next time.
Yes, sir.
Oh,
So you second? Did you second his motion for publication?
I just my questions, for
Just your question, okay.
Yes.
Okay, I have a motion, and I do not have a second. Chairman Phillips, I need a second too for further discussion. Hearing none, the motion dies.
I didn't
Chairman
have
Phillips, you're recognized
I didn't
now.
have a question. All I wanted to do was second.
Can't accept your second this time, I'm afraid. Chairman Gooch.
Well, Mr. Chair, I know, I appreciate everyone. I know that a lot of work and time and effort's gone into this budget, and it's a pretty good budget, but I have a plan B that the mayor has recommended this and evidently didn't get a second. So I guess let me explain my thought process, and then I'll put a motion on the floor and we'll just see where it goes. But if the committee members, if you turn to page 5, from the very beginning, from the table of contents, if you turn to page 5, hopefully you will see a statement of proposed operations as of 5/17/2023. In the right-hand, very last column, in County General, you'll see a difference of just over $13.5 million to get us to our 15%. So that's the number I'm looking at. You will notice, remember that the fire and rescue budget is right at $11 million. So my proposal is going to be that we have a single fire district with a rate of 30 cents, and this will fully fund the fire and rescue. And then to have the mayor go back and to cut roughly $3 million from the budget, and then we come back here on the 8th to look at that for a final recommendation. Now, I say the 8th, that if there's wants to be a special call meeting, that's fine, but that's the way I would look at it. So as far as the County General, my motion is to create a fire district at 30 cents. Have the mayor to cut $3 million from the budget, and we'll report back here on the 8th.
This will have to go to publication, so what we're going to have from you is a breakdown. Michael, you want to help him with that, or?
Well, the publication is not required until the 15th.
We have to get it in the paper and be able to prepare it in time.
The deadline for publication is the morning of the 8th. They would love it on the afternoon of the 7th, but the latest deadline for the 13th paper is the morning of the 8th.
And that was pushing it.
When you say that they're going to love it, who's going to love it?
The newspaper.
They were stretching it for us to be able to submit it on the morning of the 8th. They generally require it to be on the 7th to be able to get in the paper on the 13th. The other thing that I need to add to this is we have not, I pulled very close figures. I think they're close. I have ran what a penny on the rural fire would be. I have not seen an exact number from the assessor. I pulled data from several places to get close to that. The way I read the TCA is that a rural fire tax would have to cover the entire cost. I think 30 pennies would do it, but one of the estimates I ran had a little about around 31 pennies. So,
well, let me go back, because I need an explanation. On or before June 15th, the Budget, Finance, and Investment Committee shall cause a synopsis of the proposed budget and a statement of the tax rate required to finance the proposed budget to be published in a newspaper having general circulation in the county on or before June 15th per the private act. So I'm not understanding where the 8th is coming in.
so we have to, the paper has requirements for us to get it to them so that they can publish it by the 13th or the 15th. And so to have it, our public hearing is scheduled for the 13th, and to have it in the paper for the 13th, the paper requires us to have it to them by the morning of the 8th. So if we send it to them on the 9th, they wouldn't publish it in the paper for us in time to meet our private act deadline, is what we're saying.
So you're saying that we need to come out of this meeting tonight, we can't go home until this committee votes for a budget of publication?
In the nicest way I can say that, yes.
And I'll have to agree with that. We need to get this
Okay,
done.
then I'm sorry, I'll just make my motion to read that a single fire district is created, and I'll go ahead and say 31 cents. And that the general budget will be $3 million less than $155 million. And whatever that tax rate is.
Michael, you're going to need a minute to figure what that tax rate would be.
I was waiting to see, if there does a second, then it'll take me a minute to calculate it.
We have a brief recess, perhaps?
I beg your pardon, Commissioner Irving.
Would it be possible to have a brief recess for the numbers to?
Well, I will.
Till I get a second on this, we're going to sit here for a minute.
Well,
if I don't get a second, then we'll.
I can remove my motion while he figures up the tax rate and we take a break, if you would like to do that.
Well, I'm kind of like him. Let's get a second, and
With the second's not going to know what the tax rate is.
well, before I get him to jump hoops on the tax rate, I mean, how long is it going to take you to figure that?
So you're asking, I'm gonna make sure I'm understanding before, because it's gonna take me a minute to calculate this. I'm gonna make sure I understand what you're asking. So you would add, you essentially want to fund, if I have my numbers, the number I'm reading for the rural fire department budget's $10,949,295. So a little less than 11 million, but you want to fund that entire portion with a rural fire tax.
Yeah, to be clear that and I'm just going to round up to 11 million. I think it's $10,929,295. So
yours probably doesn't have that additional 20. Remember, we appropriated an additional 20,000 for a volunteer.
Okay, so we're going to round it up
Yeah.
to 11 million and the 31 cents to fully fund the fire and rescue budget.
Which would leave you about 2.7 million left to reach your 15%.
Well, then I'm just going to go ahead and make the recommendation at 156,620,569.
Go ahead.
31 cent fire district, single fire district, 31 cents to fully fund the fire and rescue department, and a budget recommendation of $156,620,569.
Okay, you've heard the motion. Do I hear a second? I've got lots of questions, but I want a second before we start any kind of discussion. I'm not hearing a second, so I will take what was suggested a moment ago for a 10-minute break. Just finished with a suggestion from Chairman Gooch. Are there any other motions?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to raise our tax rate to 1.8775.
I second.
I have a motion and a second. Well,
It's
We
not
had this-
it's
we
not
had-
to raise the rate, it's just to communicate that's what we're talking about for publication.
that's correct. You did last time, unless somebody else on the committee wants to see that same breakdown again. This is a motion to send to publication for a 1.8775 rate.
Just to be clear, it is not to approve, not to recommend, it is only to publish.
This is for, yes, for publication to get it in on time for the deadline. This does not mean that you're swearing in blood you're going to vote for this when it comes down to the commission floor, Commissioner Irving.
But
Chairman
it
Gooch.
doesn't mean that you're telling the public you're for a 26-cent property tax increase.
Any other discussion? Call roll.
Commissioner Sereno,
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch,
No.
Commissioner Harris,
Yes.
Commissioner Irvin,
No.
Commissioner Johnson,
No.
Commissioner P.
Yes, and that's a tie
a
vote,
tie.
which is
Motion
still a
fails.
no. Guys, it's going to be a long night. Do I have another suggestion, another motion to go to publication? Mayor, what kind of pizza do you like? We're going to be here a while, it looks like.
Never mind.
I hope I brought enough count sheets.
I'll make a motion.
Harris,
I'd
you
like,
recognize.
I'm sorry, my apologies.
My motion is that we raise it 25.13. Michael, figure that out. 1 cent different than what I was.
186,775.
1.8675.
Okay, you have a motion on the floor.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Get a second first.
Chairman
Say it
Harris.
again.
Yes,
No,
restate
I
your
just,
motion,
I just
please.
like to know where
Motion.
where you're changing that penny.
To increase our tax rate 25.13 to 18675.
What's the
Can
what's the
can we
change
get a
for the penny?
clarification of which fund you would like that reduction of penny from the original
From
recommendation?
the general.
Okay.
So the general fund would be 22.61, ambulance would be 2.52, which is 25.13.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? This is going to publication again. Any further discussion? Hearing none, call roll, Mark.
Commissioner Sereno,
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch,
No.
Commissioner Harris,
Yes.
Commissioner Irvin,
No.
Commissioner Johnson,
No.
Commissioner P.
Yes, we're still deadlocked there. Guys, you got a suggestion? I mean, I'm here till we come up with one.
Mr. Chairman,
Mayor, you recognize.
I think I know what direction this is going in, and I don't think there's going to be a resolution that's going to be of benefit to the county with the direction this is going in, and I respect all the members. If this body hypothetically were to adjourn for one day and reconvene tomorrow, would that meet the deadline? Or more broadly speaking, what is the latest date the Budget Committee could meet and pass a publication rate to meet the deadline that we need for publication?
We have to have it to the paper technically by the morning of the 8th, but really we need it by the afternoon of the 7th, and we have to have time to actually prepare the documents. And, you know, as great as the office is, the finance office is, we can't do that overnight. So, I mean,
And so we're on the same page. How much, what is the, without unnecessarily burdening Finance Department, Michael, what is that latest date for this body, this committee to meet, to come up with that publication figure, that publication number?
tomorrow or Monday, maybe? I mean, Monday's pushing it, because keep in mind, we're also...
You can't do Monday because that's steering. You can't do Tuesday, that's Public Works. You can do Wednesday, which is the 7th.
But that's too late.
Yeah, I won't have time, we won't have time to get all this stuff together, because, I mean, keep in mind, the finance office is also, payroll's next week, we're also closing the month. I mean, there's several, obviously, this is a priority for us, but keep in mind, everybody needs to get paid next Friday as well.
No, that, I understand, so that's not,
But,
that's
yeah,
not-
I mean, tomorrow, because Wednesday would be too late, and if Monday's steering and,
What was the problem with tomorrow again, Michael? Not enough time?
no, I didn't have any issue with tomorrow. I'm saying tomorrow's about our only other option. I'm also looking at Mark, if you've got, that's the dates I could think of, tomorrow would be about our only option.
The only thing. And I would also say, Chairman, to the mayor's point, I would not adjourn until tomorrow. I would recess until tomorrow.
I've got another idea.
At a later date.
I have another idea.
Let's hear it.
That the funds stay the same as proposed by the mayor, except for county general. We'll add 9 cents to the general fund. Yeah.
Nothing to ambulance.
Well, no, it would, all the funds would stay what the mayor proposed, except for general fund, which would be an addition of 9 cents.
So that would bring you, depending on how revenue comes in next year, that would bring you at 14.89% fund balance.
10 cents.
Mr. Chairman,
You're recognized, Mayor.
Michael?
Well, and let me clarify something. I hadn't got a second, but I don't feel like I've got a clarified motion yet, so that's why I'm going to allow some discussion right now. Do I hear any problem from the committee before I do that? Seeing none, go ahead.
Thank you, and my apologies, I should have allowed for a
it's-
second.
it's all right.
I want a quick question. This proposal by Commissioner Gooch would mean our fund balance would be what again? Estimated.
With 10 cents, general fund balance would be 15.82.
So does that or does that not jeopardize our AAA bond rating?
It definitely would.
And so what the goal to retain the AAA bond rating, just to make sure I understand, is 30% or better, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
And let me say this. I think the main objective is to get something to the newspaper. I can vote for this motion out of committee. I don't know that I could vote for this motion on the full commission. But if our objective tonight is to get something to the newspaper, that's what, I'm willing to do that. But I have a feeling whatever comes out of this committee is not what the full commission is going to do. They may go right back to the mayor, everything the mayor is asking for. But at least this will get something into the paper, and we can start the public discussion, the public hearings, and let's hear from the public.
Well, I'll repeat what you just told Commissioner Irving. I wouldn't put anything in there I wouldn't vote for. I think you just said you wouldn't vote for it.
I don't know that I would vote for it, but I think that's probably the very minimum. In other words, if the way I look at it, I'm looking at $13.5 million. Do we need a second or anything?
I'm letting you talk about your
Okay,
motion.
okay.
This is your motion. I
All
want
right.
to hear it
So
through, and then I'll ask for your second.
This is my train of thought, everybody. So I'm looking at, say, $14 million. So how do we get there? My initial idea was to cut about $3 million from the budget and have the fire district. And that'll get us to kind of where we need to be as far as the $14 million. That's didn't go anywhere. It didn't get a second. The mayor's recommendation got a second, but it failed to get out of the committee. So I don't know. I'm just trying to get this out of committee. I think that probably what I will end up advocating for is my original idea going into the full commission. And yeah, I do sound hypocritical by telling Commissioner Irvin that, you know, you're going on record voting for a tax increase, so I'm just going to go ahead and lay it on the table.
Okay, so your motion is to keep the mayor's recommendation set for general fund, add 10 cents to that, which would leave us a little over 15% fund balance. Is that correct, Michael?
Of course, this is an estimate because the flux, but it'll be 15.82%.
Okay, that would give you 15.82%. Do I hear a second to that motion? Another second for a second. Motion fails for lack of a second.
I need to ask a question about, there's a bit of disagreement, at least from my understanding, about the purpose of this vote. And I appreciate Commissioner Gooch's constant clarification about the vote, but with all great respect, it still confuses me. The vote tonight is nothing more than a vote for publication, for discussion of whatever the tax rate is. That is not a vote for the tax rate, as I hear it being said on one point, and then on the other point, Commissioner Gooch, you say, yes, it is. But if it's a vote for a tax increase, then the part about publication is almost moot, and it's not moot. That's the whole point of this, what we're trying to do. So, I mean, hypothetically, we could throw anything out for publication, and it doesn't mean anything as it relates to the end result of what potentially, or most likely, would be a result. Is that correct? I mean, I'm new to the process. I've never seen anything like this before, so it's interesting to me. So I get the relevancy of needing to post a number so the public can be invited to discuss that number. I will say this: if that is the purpose, I would hope this body would publish the mayor's recommendation and proposal, and here's why. I didn't realize when I started this process, and Chairman Phillips educated me on this, I did not realize that the mayor proposed the budget but didn't propose how to fund the budget. I don't understand that at all. I got to tell you, I don't understand that. I don't understand how the mayor or any other official can propose to spend money but not at the same time say, here's how we're going to pay for those expenditures. And so in my ignorance, Chairman, I not only proposed a budget, but working with Michael, I proposed what I thought was, and still very much believe is a very conservative solution to paying for that, to get us on a proper footing going forward so we don't have to do this again. And so I'm not asking for your support of that property tax increase tonight. I will ask for that later. Commissioner Gooch and I have already had a wonderful conversation. And so I'm asking that we can get that out for publication so we can have that discussion with the public and continue that discussion in this committee and then on to the full commission. So thank you for allowing me to speak.
Committee Chairman.
I want to make a motion. I would like to raise it 26.13. It's 23.61 for general, 2.52 for ambulance. Tax rate at 1.8775.
I second again.
I have a motion and a second, and some of you may think that this is something we've never seen before, but you're mistaken. We have done this on the commission floor in the past. I don't want to see it on the commission floor any more than Chairman Gooch does or anybody else sitting here. However, a healthy debate is a good thing for us. I think all sides need to be heard, and I think they are being heard. The full commission, regardless of what comes out of this committee, will have final say on the 26th. However, we have a motion and a second, and I'm not going to listen to any more discussion. Call roll, Mark.
Commissioner Shrenium,
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch,
No.
Commissioner Harris,
Yes.
Commissioner Irvin,
No. No.
Commissioner Johnson.
No.
Commissioner P.
Yes. Okay, motion fails again for a tie.
Been a commissioner for 5 years, never had this many failed motions.
You ready to try another one?
I am.
All
I
right,
absolutely am
let's hear
ready.
it.
I propose that we do 24.13, which is 21.61 in general, 2.52 in ambulance. Make it 1.55, I think.
7-5.
Can you repeat the general fund one again?
21.61, 2.52 in ambulance, which would be 24.13. And 1.8575, I believe.
Correct.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second. Any other discussion? Call roll, Mark.
Commissioner Shrenium,
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch,
No.
Commissioner Harris,
Yes.
Commissioner Irvin,
No.
Commissioner Johnson,
No.
Commissioner P.
Yes. And another stalemate there. Commissioner Gooch, if you'll indulge me for a little bit, on your original motion with the fire district, I think there's some problems there. That's why I couldn't go along with that. And I'm not trying to throw rain on what you're doing there, but we will have to have some legal advice on whether that is even possible to do. And
Well, I
how long
think
it would
that-
take to get it, set up those districts and assessment, and actually how much money it would possibly generate.
Well, I can answer some of those questions for you. Now, as far as the legality, I've been in communication with Nick, and he's not here, so I'm not going to quote him, and I think that Director Smith could probably comment on it. But the fire district would be a single district, and it would be similar to a property tax in that the assessed value of the home would be assessed, say, if we choose 31 cents. Now, on a average, I
So,
guess,
let me-
medium home of
Excuse me, go ahead.
$400,000, we're probably looking at around $300 a year on the fire tax assessment. Now, the reason that this makes sense to me is because the Rural Fire and Rescue Department, along with these public safety buildings, is a direct benefit to the unincorporated areas mainly. And so it can be argued that they could share that cost in the same sense that the city taxpayers burden the cost of the Murfreesboro Fire and Rescue Department, that the unincorporated areas could support what we're doing for them. The 6 public safety buildings, a professional fire department, and it's going to cost $300 a year. Now, are there other legal questions? Probably. But if it's something that's kind of palatable to you, then we could work those legal issues out before the 8th. And so I'm going to make the motion again. That, where are my notes? That we create a single fire district at 31 cents. And to fund the county general budget at 100
Million?
So I'm gonna read that number to make, can I clarify his motion? If we were to take off of there, I think it would be 156 million, not 156,000.
My apologies, $156,620,569. And just again, what we have done in Rutherford County has created a professional, state-of-the-art, top-notch fire protection for people in the unincorporated area. And we've committed ourselves, and I appreciate Chairman Reed, with the 6 public safety buildings that will benefit the unincorporated citizens. Citizens of Murfreesboro, Smyrna, and Laverne already have those benefits, and they're paying for them. And I just don't, I'm sure I'm going to hear from the rural areas. I get that. But at the same time, what we're doing directly benefits them in a way that does not benefit the municipality citizens. So to me, it makes sense to propose this, to talk about it, and hopefully get a second, Commissioner Irvin, and work out any legal details by the 8th. So moved.
Okay, I have a motion on the floor. Do I hear a second?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Good proposed just for the publication only, right?
What he says, only he expects you to vote for that. But go ahead. You're welcome to make a second. Is this a second? If it is, I'll recognize it.
Okay.
Okay, I have a second.
Yes.
Now, we're going to have discussion. Any committee members first, because I'm going to get in line. Commissioner Irving.
It's a question to Michael. Implications, concerns about the fire tax proposal.
So I have a couple from the finance director point of view. I do want to point out one thing. I have spoken with Nick about this a few times today, so I don't want to say too much because he's not here so I hope I don't get this wrong. I do believe there's a waiting period once. We would have to create boundaries. Me and him are both looking into the TCA, whether there would be one fire tax boundary, whether it could be one fire tax boundary or it would have to be multiple. I do believe we would have to send out notice to every person within that fire tax boundary, and I believe there's a 30-day waiting period before you could even implement it. So I don't know the legal realm of how that would affect, because obviously even 30 days from now, we're past July 1. So I honestly don't know the answer to that. I do know Nick was looking into that, so I don't know how that would even work, per se. I will tell you the other large issue I would have from a financial perspective would be the same issue I would have with any budgeting down to the 15%. It would make it very hard for this body to accept any grant going forward, because any grant that you would accept would drop you down below the 15%. And we've accepted millions in grants this year, including the revenue. So for example, if we were to take, for example, we've gotten $2.5 million of opioid money, or approximately, yeah, in that realm. We couldn't, as soon as I book that expenditure, if it doesn't include an offsetting expense to fund balance, it's going to drop us below the 15%. So it's going to cause us some problems there, I think. So I have two reservations. One, it would be a very quick turnaround to get it onto the letter sent out, the waiting period, if it's even available, and then we have to get it into the system to the trustee's office downstairs, all in time for tax season. And I honestly don't know that answer tonight, if that would be a Nick question when he's available. And then my other reservation would be if I understand Commissioner Gooch's motion correctly, it would be to budget down to that 15%.
Well, it would, and keep in mind that we can as far, doesn't mean that we can't accept a grant. We would just in the same
You'd have to change your,
motion to change our policy, which is very simple to do.
you'd have to change your fund, yeah, you would have to change your fund balance policy before you could accept that, any type of, or add any additional expenditure that didn't also increase your fund balance. So that would give me some pause there. And then anytime we get down that low, it would give me some pause, because keep in mind, in July, August, and September, or even June, we don't really get we don't get the bulk of our money. So we're floating not just payroll, but we're floating utility payments, operating cost of the county, overtime for sheriff's office, ambulance, fire, all those things. So that would be my reservations.
If I could ask, I mean, we're just open discussion amongst friends. Mr. Irvin, are you able to support any tax increase, 1 penny?
I'm going to keep an open mind, but I don't like tax increases.
Would you be able, if a new tax for a segment of the population who pays less taxes than other segments, to give them a benefit of, say, fire protection for their home and property and lives?
Interesting.
Commissioner Irvin, let me
approach.
interject something. You don't have to answer any of this.
I know.
And if you want to make an answer there, after that, the chair's going to be recognized, but you can go ahead and answer his question.
I think the fire district issue is one that needs to be looked at. I do notice, and it's been pointed out by some of my constituents, there are certain inequities there versus the incorporated area versus the rural areas. But for some of the reasons Nick mentioned, and generally go slow approach towards new taxes, I think it would be appropriate to study it, take a look at it, probably over the summer, which probably precludes it from being a part of this mix, probably. I'm willing to spend whatever time is needed to study it between now and whenever, but I have concerns. That's fair. Thank you.
Okay. I said I would be recognized next. However, I will, any other commissioner wants to speak up first. I'd like to address some of the things about the fire district. First of all, I've mentioned in the past, being on the budget committee, a lot of times you'll find out that you're voting no, but you got to figure out a way to pay for it. Okay, we're at this for some of us. There's many of you sitting here voted to increase and vote for a paid fire department for the county. Well, now it's time to pay for it. Understand that. I'm the only one out of the 21 of us that voted no, because I felt like our volunteers were adequate for my area. Y'all didn't. Now you're trying to make a decision for my people and my unincorporated people, which I also have people inside the city limits of Murfreesboro that are in my district, so I'm not speaking just for the rural people. But I want to point out a few things that you're talking about, since you're worried about spending unincorporated or money in the unincorporated areas with city dollars or constituents that live in the city. By state statute, fires support is supported by situs tax. Well, guess what? What are we sending situs tax money on? Well, one of the big chunks is waste. Anybody in the city or the municipalities taking waste? County taking care of it? Yes, and that's a huge amount of our situs tax is going in there. We have enough situs tax money to support the fire department as it is at this level right now. That's money that's generated in the unincorporated areas, okay? The situs tax money is generated in the unincorporated areas, and also the hotel motel taxes, which in turn, what is it, over 50% of that goes back directly to them to promote tourism and goes back to the chamber. So that's kind of a revolving thing. That's kind of, they're kind of paying to promote themselves. But the money is there in the situs tax to pay for this fire service as it is right now. So saying that the city constituents that you have are being treated unfairly is not true. When I say it's not true, it's because this money is generated in the unincorporated areas. And Michael, am I wrong on any of these statements?
That's correct.
Well, not only that, the big problem I got about this suggestion is this should have gone to public safety. Or, I mean, come on, guys. We want to follow our committee process, let's do it. You know, if we want to throw it out the window, you can do that too, but I don't think that's a pertinent thing to do. The way we're talking about funding our fire departments and our rescue, EMS and EMA, has been tried in court. Wilson County in particular, I went over and talked to their mayor, their finance director, and see how they actually are doing it, because they're in a similar financial shape as we are, and they have mostly a paid, although they have a volunteer department too. They've been sued by constituents that lived in the city that thought it wasn't right. Well, the comptroller of the state of Tennessee agrees with Wilson County. And what we're basically doing is the same thing Wilson County does, not just once, but twice. So I think that using this situs tax money to support our fire department is what we need to do. Now, let's get back to, well, anybody else got a question about some of the things I've stated? If not, let's get back and see if we can come up with a motion that we can live with to go to publication on. Chairman Phillips, you got a question?
I'm not sure it's a question, but just a statement that a fire tax has merit, and it's been mildly discussed over the last couple of years, but not in any detail. To implement something like that would take months to develop, and we don't have months to adopt some type of a tax rate. That money could not come in a timely manner. I think it has merit. I think it should be discussed, and I think it should be thoroughly vetted in the committee process before it comes to budget. Let me just say, I know a lot of people are probably really concerned about the 27 cents proposed increase in our tax rate coming out of the mayor's office. But let me just say, if I can, try to influence in some way that the mayor has worked really hard. Our finance department has worked really hard. Every single solitary department has worked really hard on a zero-based budget, not asking for any new money. We have, as a commission, we've passed building, adding on to new schools. It's $156 million. We've added to the budget by increasing employee salaries. These are things that we've already done, and the money that the mayor's asking for is to actually pay for those things above and beyond the zero-based budget that we've all been looking at. I would highly suggest, and I disagree with the Chairman P here a little bit. I would highly recommend that we send this proposed budget out for publication for public input, not recommending that This is what we come up with, but we want the public's input because this is what it would take to fund the budget that the mayor has put out. Always be changed, it can. But I'd hate to see us put out some type of a budget like instead of 27 cents, 15 cents, and then us go through the process of increasing it back up. I'd rather see us decrease it if necessary than to increase it. Once again, this process has been, to me, an educational process for all of us, but what we've asked our departments to do is to come to us with a zero-based budget. Don't ask for anything new, and that's what they've done. And we've already approved some things that we really need to fund from an educational perspective, from a public safety perspective, and I would highly encourage you guys to at least forward this recommendation or something very similar to the public for input, Once again, the fire tax has merit, but it really needs to be discussed and talked about. It needs to go through the process, which would, in my mind, take several months to accomplish and to get public input from that as well. And I don't think it could be implemented in a matter of weeks. I think it would take months for us to put that process together. I understand there may be a couple of counties that have done it recently, at least one county that may have done it recently, so we probably wouldn't have to reinvent the wheel, but it would be something that we'd really have to take a serious look at. And for the first time, I guess for the first time ever, Mr. Chairman, we would have two different property tax rates countywide, and that's something that I think we would really need to educate the public on. So I would highly encourage, and it's your call, but I would highly encourage that we pass, that we forward the recommendation from the mayor's office on for publication to get public input so that we can make adjustments as needed. Once again, I would respectfully disagree with the chairman that you're not voting for it, but you're voting to send the mayor's recommendation out for public input, and we've got that meeting already on our calendar, the public input. So I would highly encourage that we get that done tonight. If not, it would be my recommendation that we recess until tomorrow night to get input from the commissioner who is not in attendance tonight. Maybe he could be here tomorrow night and have input and could move forward with it. So one of those two things, either we're not getting anywhere, we recess, or we forward that recommended budget from the mayor's office on for public input. Thank you.
I'd like to make another quick statement. First of all, Chairman Gooch is one of my most favorite, not only one of my most favorite commissioners, but one of my most favorite people. He's a good man, and when he comes in here with something, he's something he's thought about and he cares about, and I respect that fully. Just because he and I disagree, don't mean that we don't understand each other, and we just look at things from a little bit different angle. And having said that, Commissioner, is there any kind of compromise motion you might make? I'm sorry. So we do have, read the motion back, Mark.
Motion is to establish a single fire district with 31 cents and to fund the general fund at $156,620,569.
Okay, you have a motion and a second on that. Is there any other discussion or any questions? The only thing I want, Michael.
Can you read that number? Can you read that number back to me, Mark, the appropriation number?
$156,620,569.
156, 925, 69?
156,620,569. $3 million less is what I understood. Is that
Thank you.
correct, Commissioner?
What percent would that leave our fund at, balance at?
Without me knowing exactly what the penny would bring in, because I just don't know that, it would be really close to the 15%, like within a 0.5% or so.
Any discussion, any questions from the commissioners on the committee?
Mr. Chairman,
Reno?
this is just for the, like Chairman Phillips said, from the mayor recommendation, right, for the publication.
This is only for publication.
Yes,
Yes. Now, something that I want to speak for a moment, since I have no more questions, unless you're not through, Commissioner Sereno. I don't like a tax increase. I pay it. My family pays it. I live out in a rural area. I've got some farmland, and I pay a lot more taxes than some people do. And property taxes hurt me just as much as they do anybody else. I don't like them. I don't want to raise them. If you want to point a finger at why this is costing us money, I'd say talk to your state legislators. They're the ones that are not letting us look at increasing impact fees. That's bottom line. And I want to say about that, it's not anybody sitting here. It's something that I've beat my head against the wall for about 15 years. However, having said that, the proposal that we're looking at, Chairman Gooch, scares me for a couple of reasons. One is we're perilously close to that 15%, which is something we could change, yes. That 15%, though, if we fall below that, I think that's endangering our AAA bond rating. I think even pushing it that close will endanger that. Right now, that's saving us about $6 million. So, we may be saving a few thousand or even a couple of million here on this, but look what you're going to lose. You're going to lose the advantage of that money that you would be saving. And like I said, Michael, if I'm not mistaken, you quoted us around $6 million just on the budget that we're looking at for the schools and what's been proposed up to now.
That's just on the debt issuance that we would issue in July. We've saved many more, multiple millions on top of that in the past. For example, we were borrowing things at a 1.5 or 1.6% interest rate because of our AAA.
So I don't think it's prudent for us to even think about jeopardizing that. That's why I'm not for this now. If y'all want to throw something out there just to stick on the wall that you can stick into paper, I'll flat out tell you right now, I will not support it on the commission floor. Mayor, I recognize it.
Thank you. I want to be careful here because I don't like to correct a member of this body, but I want to make something very clear. If we have a 15% fund rate, we don't jeopardize our AAA bond rating. It's dead. We don't have a AAA bond rating. We're right now at 26%. And we have to get that, according to Michael Smith, our finance director, it is the key component among other components, but it is a critical component in our AAA bond rating. It was the budget I proposed with the tax increase that moved back fund balance back over 30%, which is necessary to create to keep our AAA bond rating. If we move our fund balance back down to 15%, I don't care if it's 14 or 16, pick a number, it's dead, and you won't get it back. And essentially, Michael, if I'm not saying this absolutely 100% correct, you correct me. This is important. This is very important. And so I want to make sure we're understanding. Right now, we're at 26.5% on our fund balance, correct? We need to get that back over 30% to retain our AAA bond rating. If we take this down to 15% with this proposal, it's dead. Nothing else we do matters. It's dead.
Any further discussion? Read the motion one last time, Mark, and then I want you to call roll.
Establish a single fire district with 31 cents and fund the general fund at $156,620,569.
Call roll.
Commissioner Srinion,
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch,
Yes.
Commissioner Harris,
No.
Commissioner Irvin,
No.
Commissioner Johnson,
No.
Commissioner P.
No.
Motion fails 2-4.
I'll go ahead and throw out another compromise for publication. And I'll just go back to my motion of 10 cents.
He has a motion to keep the funds as the mayor proposed, except for the general fund, and he proposes adding 10 cents to the general fund. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, and that is, if it passes, it'll go to publication, and then the public would now be involved in able to see it and talk to the commissioners and you know, compromise.
All right, I'm looking for a second. Other second for a second. Hearing none, let's listen for another compromise. Mayor, you wanted to be addressed?
Thank you, but no thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Chairman Harris.
listen, we're not going getting anywhere here. So what I don't understand is Wayne Irvin ain't going to vote for nothing. So there's no sense in even trying to do anything because I don't even know what to say.
Personal
But I
privilege,
think-
Mr. Chairman. I think I made a comment earlier as to exactly what my position is. I respect your position.
Well, that's, let me interrupt, that's why I said earlier you didn't have to answer that. Guys, let's not talk about each other, other than in a good way.
I don't think it's talking about each other. I think it's just talking amongst ourselves as if we were alone, not on television, to find out what each other really stands for and what we could possibly get out. So I don't think it's attacking anybody. I would never attack commission on the floor. It's just a roundtable discussion to find out where people stand on what we can do. So,
Well, my point is, I can't read anybody's mind, so I'm not going to make an assumption on what their thoughts are. My wife taught me that a long time ago. We've been married 42 years, so I kind of like it. But at any rate, Commissioner Harris, you're recognized again.
We are 6 people out of 21. We need to, if you vote for the mayor's recommendation, it doesn't mean you're a guarantee yes when we go before the entire committee. I don't see, the reason I'm bringing this up is there's a piece of paper, this is every single budget we went over. Every one of y'all voted and approved those budgets. Every single one of them on the mayor's budget. So we've already on record approving these things, and we have a recommendation here. It doesn't mean, I'm looking at 26.13, but I could, vote for higher than that. I could also vote for lower than that. But we need to get on the floor, and we need to let the people hear what we got to say. They might disagree with us so bad it would change us, and then we had to find alternatives. We'd have to. I get a lot of no's, but I'm not getting any plans or anything other than the one we got here. So, Trey, me and you've talked, you know how I feel about you. This ain't personal. You know it ain't personal. I didn't take any of your stuff personal. But I know we need to get this out and let people see it. It doesn't, if I had to make a motion and say, let's do this increase, but Trey Gooch is definitely not for it, I'll say it that way. I'll say that Trey Gooch, even though he is for it, that it's, you know, this is just, it's for us to get this out and let people, let them talk about it, let them see where we're at, and let the 21 other guys get involved in it too, or the 15 other guys. I make a motion. I'd like to raise 26.13, which would raise our tax rate 1.8775.
Do I hear a second?
Yes, I'd like to second because Chairman Harris said, you know, the proposed that the mayor already signed approves, and so that's why I,
Okay, I have a second.
yes.
I do want to make a statement. I have been notified Commissioner Piercy will be here shortly. So if we keep having deadlocks, maybe that'll change when we have one more person in. Mayor, you're recognized.
So Commissioner Piercy just called me just a few minutes ago, and his question to me was, what's going on? I said, well, we're in Budget Committee, and we miss you. He said he generally thought it was Monday night, so it was just a miscommunication. It happens. He has told me he is on his way, and so as a member of this body, I hope we will wait for his arrival, Mr. Chairman.
We have a motion and we have a second on the floor. Are there any discussion on that? Commissioner Gooch?
Well, this is, I think, pretty much mirrors the mayor's recommendation. Does he know how long he will take to?
Let me tell you, he was in the field, quote unquote, and he says, I'm nasty. I said, come as you are. Now, knowing Commissioner Piercy like you and I do, that I'm sure that'll be fine.
Oh, yes.
But, I mean, obviously, this committee's at a point where we're stuck, and I respect that. Everybody's holding to their principles, and I don't want anybody to violate those. Those are important. But I think Commissioner Piercy did tell me he was on his way, and so this is up to you, Mr. Chairman, how you want to proceed.
Well, we've got a motion and a second on the floor right now. Is there any other discussion pertinent to this motion? Hearing none, call roll, Mark.
Commissioner Stringhill?
Yes.
Excuse me. Commissioner Gooch? That was Commissioner Gooch.
I'll vote no one more time.
Commissioner Harris?
Yes.
Commissioner Irvin?
No.
Commissioner Johnson? Commissioner P?
Yes.
That motion fails.
Do I hear any other motions? If not, I'm going to call a short recess till Commissioner Piercy shows. Do I hear any objection from the committee? Hearing none, we're recessed. Our budget meeting back to order. Our lost lamb has showed up, and I kind of caught him up on what we've been discussing to let him know. So he's not completely walking into this blind. However, we are looking for a motion to send a proposal for publication. And at this time, I've had a commissioner raise his hand. You're recognized, Commissioner Harris.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I would like to propose a 26.13 cent, 23.61 to general, 2.52 to ambulance, which will be a 1.8775.
Okay, I have a motion.
Second.
I have a second. Discussion. Mr. Piercy, have you got any questions? We were about discussed out over here.
This would be what increase to the tax rate? basically?
26.13 cents, and that equates to a 16.17% increase.
And this is what would go to publication if this gets voted in. And as we've discussed, this doesn't mean that you have to support this in the future, but as suggested, you know, you should. I think we can all agree on that. Any other discussion? Commissioner Piercy.
Earlier, we had taken 10 cents from the school. Is that taking the 10 cents off of this?
Excuse me, go ahead.
So that we've actually moved 10 cents from the general purpose school fund and another penny from educational capital projects for a total of 11 cents moved into debt service, and this does take that into account.
And we're still going 26 cents.
That's correct. Those cents would go, 23.61 cents would go into the county general fund. That would balance the county general fund with revenues and expenditures and would get you to approximately 28% fund balance, a little below where we need to be for AAA. However, I think current year revenues will get us up to where we need to be to keep the AAA. And then it would be 2.52 pennies to the ambulance service fund would go there, and that gets you your 26.13 pennies.
Come in on this late. They said it's been a 3-3 vote. Would anybody that has not supported this vote care to explain to me why or what their idea was before we vote on this?
There's nobody there. I'll make a quick comment. The reason I've gone the other way, one, is I don't want to jeopardize our AAA bond rating. You know, this year alone, we're looking at about $6 million savings because of the interest rates we're getting because of that. So that's a big plus to me. And two, this amount of money that we're asking for would mean that we're not going to come back next year and say, hey, we need another 5 cents, or the next year. This should do us for the next 3 years. And Mayor, you might want to elaborate on that. If you do, you're welcome to, or any other member of the committee. Mayor, you're recognized.
No, and to restate some of the things that I've already said, you know, we, the county, got in this situation in large part through no fault of our own. We've been dealt a hand to play, as I've said before, by the Tennessee General Assembly, where we've been forced, or this body and my predecessors have been forced to kick the can down the road. The can has gotten so large, it's the size of a 50-gallon drum, and we've run out of road and we can't kick anymore. Our deficit is, you like that, didn't you, Chairman Harris? Well, it's now so large that we can't afford to kick it anymore. We've ran out of road and it's too big, $64 million deficit. And as Michael has said, our general fund deficit has grown by $10 million this year alone. And I hate raising taxes. More than anybody in here, I hate it. But we have, as a mayor and as a body, we have an obligation to be fiscally responsible, good stewards, and going forward, I think with this proposed property tax increase, we set the table right. We continue. I will certainly continue. I know I've talked to Chairman Harris about this. We will continue to put pressure on the Tennessee legislature to do the right and equitable thing by Rutherford County, things they've already done for other counties and other municipalities, and relieving the property taxpayers of the shouldering the burden of paying for growth. So this puts us in a strong position to do that, among other things. And I would not recommend this if I didn't think it was absolutely necessary for the physical vitality of this community. So I know Michael has worked on this, his and his team, literally hundreds of man hours, and I've been with them every step of the way. If there was another way to do this, trust me, I would be there. But I don't see another way to do this.
So this should take us through 3 more years?
That is my expectation, yes, sir.
And it's been 4 years since we've had an increase?
Yes, sir.
So you're looking at basically less than 4 a year if we spread it over the 7?
quite honestly, Commissioner, if we do this, and this is the thing about this budget that Michael and I spent as much time on this year being year one, we spent a lot of time looking at year 2 and 3 and what does this budget do to years 2 and 3? What kind of pressure does it put on year 2 and 3? And what we're trying to relieve some of that pressure. As you will recall, this body voted on fee increases out of the codes and building department. That's not factored in here, and I don't want it factored in here because we don't know what the growth situation is like. We're talking about other different points and sources of revenue so that we don't have to have these big whopping property tax increases every 4 years. Does that mean in 4 or 5 or 6 years we don't come back with a small one? I can't guarantee that, but we're not going to do this again. That I'll guarantee you.
Any other questions or discussion from the committee? Call roll, Mark.
Commissioner Srinial?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
No.
Commissioner Harris?
Yes.
Commissioner Irvin?
No.
Commissioner Johnson?
No.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-3.
Michael, do we need anything else for publication? Okay.
We've got one more item on the agenda.
That's right. So we've got A done. You need a minute to come up with B, or?
I'm ready.
Okay, the revenue and expenditures by fund, is that what you're looking for?
That's correct.
And I thought we had that stated a minute ago, did we not?
We stated the tax rate is part of Commissioner Harris's motion, and now we need a recommendation or a motion to approve the appropriations and revenues.
Okay.
Mark, do we normally take these as one or by fund? Can I read them all?
No, you can just rate them all. It'd be just like the tax rate.
Yeah.
Just all one motion.
So I can read them all and then,
Please do, that way
Okay.
us and the public will hear it.
okay, so the revised revenue, excuse me, will be $159,632,245 for the county general fund, with appropriations of $159,620,569. The solid waste fund did not change, but it will be $7,750,000 for both revenues and appropriations. The ambulance service fund, the revenues will be $22,284,618 with appropriations of $22,278,663. The Industrial Economic Development Board will have revenues of $143,401 with appropriations of $696,299. Special Purpose Fund 121 will have estimated revenues of $2,000 with appropriations of $20,000. The Drug Control Fund will have revenues of $402,000 with appropriations of $588,000. The Highway Fund will have estimated revenues at $18,295,135. Appropriations for the Highway Fund will be $18,215,809. General Purpose School Fund revenues will be $518,420,946, with appropriations also being $518,420,946. Centralized Cafeteria Fund 143 will have estimated revenues at $29,715,000, with appropriations at $34,206,090. Educational capital projects will have both estimated revenues and appropriations at $18,088,561. The general debt service will have estimated revenues at $67,719,656, with appropriations at $69,523,393.
Okay, you've heard the finance director's statement on revenue and expenditures by our funds. Do I hear a motion? This will go to publication. Have a motion. Do I hear a second? Mr. Johnson, second. Any discussion? Call roll, Mark.
Commissioner Srinial,
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch,
No.
Commissioner Harris,
Yes.
Commissioner Irvin,
No?
Commissioner Johnson. No. Commissioner Piercy,
Yes.
Commissioner P.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-3.
When it's that close, I'd rather you call that for me.
Yeah.
Thank you. Is there any other business?
Did I get that right? Commissioner Johnson, you seconded that motion, is that correct?
He did.
Okay, that's what I was thinking.
Any other business? Hearing none, we're adjourned. Thank you, guys.